The child appeared at the gates of Thornmere Manor on a Wednesday afternoon in November, her face streaked with rain and her bare feet bleeding onto the gravel drive. She could not have been more than 7 years old, and she curtsied to the man in black who opened the gate as though she were greeting royalty at court. "Are you the lord my grandmother prayed to?" she asked, her voice clear despite the chattering of her teeth. Lucasta Hartridge, who had been walking the perimeter of the estate to inspect the damage from the storm, stopped dead in her tracks. She had come to Thornmere 3 days prior to catalogue the late Lord Thornmere's library for auction, and in those 3 days, she had seen precisely one other living soul, the silent housekeeper who left meals outside her door and vanished before Lucasta could thank her. The man in black, however, was new, and he was staring at the child with an expression Lucasta could not quite parse, something between recognition and profound confusion. "I am not a lord," the man said slowly, crouching to the child's level, "and I am certainly not the subject of anyone's prayers." "But you're here," the child insisted. "Grandmother said if I came to the black gates and curtsied to the Lord in black, he would help. She said he owed her a debt from long ago." The man's jaw slid sideways. Lucasta caught herself before she could catalogue the gesture, as she would a book's condition, and he glanced up toward the house. His eyes, she noted with the clinical precision that had served her well in her profession, were an unusual shade of amber, almost gold in the gray afternoon light. "Your grandmother," he said carefully. "What was her name?" "Mercy Ashton," the child said. "She died yesterday. There's no one left but me, and the landlord says I can't stay without rent, and I haven't any money, and grandmother said that I would help." The man stood abruptly. "Yes, I see." Lucasta found herself stepping forward before she'd made a conscious decision to do so. "Forgive me, but this child is soaked through and clearly unwell. Whatever debt may or may not exist, surely it can be discussed after she's been warmed and fed." The man's gaze snapped to her, and for a moment Lucasta had the unsettling sensation of being catalogued herself, assessed, measured, and filed away in some internal ledger. Then his expression shifted into something that might have been amusement. "Miss Hartridge," he said, and she did not ask how he knew her name. How refreshing to encounter someone who prioritizes the practical over the dramatic. "Yes, of course. Bring her inside." "I'm not your servant," Lucasta said mildly, already reaching for the child's hand. "But I will bring her inside because it's the decent thing to do, not because you've commanded it." The corner of his mouth twitched. "Noted." The child, who had been watching this exchange with wide eyes, allowed Lucasta to lead her toward the house. "Are you the Lord's wife?" she whispered. "I am no one's wife," Lucasta said. "And he is no one's lord. I'm here to catalogue books, and he's here to—" She paused, realizing she had no idea why he was here. "What is your name, darling?" "Nell," the child said. "Nell Ashton." Behind them, the man in black followed at a distance that struck Lucasta as deliberately measured, as though he were afraid of coming too close. She filed that observation away as well. The housekeeper materialized in the entrance hall, took one look at Nell, and vanished again, returning moments later with blankets and a tray of bread and butter. Lucasta settled the child by the fire in the library, the only room in the vast house that seemed even marginally habitable, and watched as Nell devoured the food with the single-minded focus of someone who had not eaten in days. The man in black stood in the doorway, neither entering nor leaving. "You knew her grandmother," Lucasta said. It was not a question. "I did." "And you owe her a debt." "I do." "How refreshingly forthcoming," Lucasta said dryly. "Shall I guess the nature of the debt? Or will you actually explain why a woman would send her dying granddaughter to a stranger's gate?" He stepped into the room then, and Lucasta noticed for the first time how carefully he moved, as though every gesture were choreographed to appear natural. "Miss Hartridge, has anyone ever told you that you ask too many questions?" "Constantly," she said. "It's why I'm so good at my profession. I notice things. For instance, I notice that you've been in this house for at least 3 days. There's dust on every surface except the chair you're currently avoiding. And yet, I've never seen you eat, drink, or sleep. I notice that you knew my name without introduction. And I notice that you're standing precisely far enough from the fire that its light doesn't quite reach you. Nell had stopped eating and was watching them both with the unnerving focus of a child who has learned to read adult tensions for survival. The man smiled, and it was not a pleasant expression. You notice a great deal, Miss Hartridge. Tell me, has it ever occurred to you that some observations are safer left unspoken? Frequently, Lucasta said. I speak them anyway. It's a character flaw. Or a survival instinct, he murmured. Very well. My name is Everard Blackstone. I am, or was, Lord Thornmere's younger brother. I left this house 43 years ago, and I have not set foot in it since. When I learned of my brother's death, I returned to settle his affairs. That is all you need to know. Except it isn't, Lucasta said. Because 43 years ago, you would have been, what, 20, 25? And you don't look a day over 30 now. The silence that followed was profound enough that Lucasta could hear the rain drumming against the windows and the crackle of the fire and Nell's shallow breathing. Miss Hartridge, Everard said quietly, you are standing in a room with a starving child and a man who is not what he appears to be. I strongly suggest you take the child upstairs, lock the door, and forget this conversation ever happened. No, Nell said suddenly. Both adults turned to look at her. She had set down the bread and was staring at Everard with an expression of fierce determination. Grandmother said you were kind. She said you saved her once, when she was young and in trouble, and you asked for nothing in return. She said if anything happened to her, I should come here, because you were the only one who would understand. Understand what? Lucasta asked gently. Nell pulled back her sleeve. On her thin wrist, barely visible in the firelight, was a mark. A birthmark, perhaps, or a scar, in the shape of a crescent moon. Everard made a sound that might have been a curse or a prayer. Mercy's line, he said. Of course she would. He stopped, dragged a hand through his hair. The child is marked. She's a seer, or she will be when she comes of age. Lucasta, who prided herself on her rationality, felt the ground shift beneath her. A seer. Someone who can perceive things others cannot, Everard said. The dead, the hidden, the... He gestured vaguely at himself. The unnatural. You're saying she can see what you are. I'm saying she will be able to soon enough. And when word gets out, and it will, because these things always do, there will be people who want to use her, or silence her. He looked at Nell with something that might have been regret. Your grandmother was right to send you here. I do owe her a debt. She kept my secret for 40 years, and she asked for nothing in exchange, except that I protect her bloodline if the need arose. Protect her from what? Lucasta demanded. From the Order of St. Cyprian, Everard said flatly. A group of very determined, very well-funded individuals who believe that anyone with the sight is either a witch or a demon and should be dealt with accordingly. Nell had gone very still. They came to our house, she whispered. 3 men in gray coats. They asked grandmother questions. She told them I was simple, that I couldn't see anything, but they didn't believe her. After they left, she told me to run. She told me to come here and curtsy to the Lord in black, and he would keep me safe. Lucasta found herself on her feet without remembering standing. They're hunting a child. They're hunting a potential threat, Everard corrected. In their minds, she's a danger to the natural order. They won't stop until they've found her. Then we don't let them find her. Everard raised an eyebrow. We? I'm not leaving a child to face this alone, Lucasta said. And unless I'm very much mistaken, you can't exactly march into town and hire a solicitor to arrange guardianship, can you? You're, what did you call it, unnatural, which means you need someone who can move freely in daylight, someone who can handle legal documents and make inquiries without arousing suspicion. She crossed her arms. You need me. I need you to leave, Everard said, but there was no heat in it. Miss Hartridge, you have no idea what you're offering to involve yourself in. Then explain it to me, she said. I'm an excellent listener, despite evidence to the contrary. He studied her for a long moment, and Lucasta had the distinct impression she was being weighed against some internal standard. Finally, he sighed. Very well. But not here, and not now. The child needs rest, and you need— He paused. When did you last eat, Miss Hartridge? I'm not the one who needs feeding, she said, then immediately regretted it when she saw his expression shudder. No, he agreed quietly. You're not. Nell fell asleep within minutes of being tucked into bed in one of the upstairs rooms, her small hand clutching Lucasta's sleeve until the very last moment. Lucasta stood in the doorway for a long time afterward, watching the rise and fall of the child's breathing, before she finally descended to the library where Everard waited. He had moved closer to the fire now, though he still kept a careful distance. In the flickering light, Lucasta could see the shadows under his eyes, the tension in his shoulders, the way his hands gripped the arms of the chair as though anchoring himself in place. You're not going to ask what I am? He said without preamble. I'm fairly certain I already know, Lucasta said, settling into the chair opposite him. The question is whether you're going to confirm it, or whether we're going to spend the next hour dancing around the subject like characters in a Gothic novel. Despite himself, he laughed, a short, sharp sound that held more surprise than humor. You're remarkable, Miss Hartridge. I'm practical, she corrected. There's a difference. Now, are you going to tell me how you plan to protect Nell, or shall I draft a plan myself and present it to you in the morning? Both, he said. I have resources, money, property, connections, but they're all tied to an identity I haven't used in decades. It will take time to access them, and time is something we don't have. The order moves quickly once they've identified a target. Then we need to move her, Lucasta said, somewhere they won't think to look. Agreed. But where? Every property I own is documented. They'll check them all. Lucasta tapped her fingers against the chair arm, thinking, what about a property you don't own, something held in trust perhaps, or under a different name? Such as? Such as mine, she said. I have a cottage in Somerset, small, remote, inherited from an aunt. It's in my name, and there's no reason anyone would connect it to you or to Nell. Everard stared at her. You're offering to shelter a fugitive child in your home. I'm offering to shelter a frightened little girl who has nowhere else to go, Lucasta said. There's a difference. Miss Hartridge. Lucasta, she interrupted. If we're going to be co-conspirators, we might as well use Christian names. Lucasta, he said, and the way he pronounced it, carefully, as though testing the weight of it, made something shift in her chest. You understand that if the Order discovers you've helped her, you'll be in danger as well. I understand that if I do nothing, a child will die, Lucasta said. That's all the understanding I require. He looked at her for a long moment, and she had the sense that he was seeing her, truly seeing her, for the first time. You're either very brave or very foolish. I've been called both, she said, usually in the same breath. I believe it, he murmured. Then more briskly, very well, we'll take her to Somerset, but we'll need to move carefully. The Order has eyes everywhere, and if they're already watching this house, then we'll need a distraction, Lucasta finished. Something to draw their attention away from Nell. What did you have in mind? She smiled. How do you feel about playing the role of a grieving brother settling his late sibling's estate? Over the next 3 days, they executed the plan with a precision that surprised them both. Everard made a great show of meeting with solicitors and auctioneers, discussing the sale of Thornmere's contents in tones loud enough to be overheard by anyone who might be listening. Lucasta, meanwhile, quietly arranged for her cataloguing work to be completed early, citing a family emergency that required her immediate return to Somerset. Nell, for her part, remained hidden in the upstairs room, emerging only at night when Lucasta brought her meals. The child was remarkably resilient, asking few questions and accepting the situation with the pragmatism of someone who had learned early that life was rarely fair or predictable. On the third night, as Lucasta was preparing to leave, Nell caught her hand. "Will he come with us?" she asked. "The Lord in Black?" "He's not," Lucasta began, then stopped. "Why do you ask?" "Because grandmother said he was kind, but he's also sad," Nell said. "I can see it, even though he tries to hide it. He's been alone for a very long time." Lucasta felt something tighten in her throat. "Yes," she said softly. "I think he has. Will you make him less alone?" I. Lucasta paused. "I don't know, darling. That's not really something one person can do for another." "Grandmother said it was," Nell said. "She said that's what love is, making someone less alone." Before Lucasta could respond, there was a sharp knock at the door downstairs. 3 quick raps, a pause, then 2 more, the signal Everard had arranged. "Time to go," Lucasta said, helping Nell into her coat. "Remember, you're my niece, and we're traveling to visit family. If anyone asks, you've been ill, which is why you're so quiet." Nell nodded solemnly. They descended the stairs to find Everard waiting in the entrance hall, dressed for travel. He had arranged for a carriage, a closed one with curtains that could be drawn, and a driver who asked no questions. The journey to Somerset took 2 days, with stops at coaching inns, where Lucasta and Nell took rooms while Everard remained with the carriage, citing a preference for sleeping under the stars. It was a thin excuse, but no one questioned it. On the second night, as they sat in the private parlor of a small inn, Nell finally asleep upstairs, Everard spoke. "You asked me once what I am," he said quietly. "I never answered." "You didn't need to," Lucasta said. "I worked it out on my own. And yet you're still here. Did you expect me to run screaming? Most people would." "I'm not most people," Lucasta said. "Besides, you've been remarkably well behaved. No dramatic swooping, no biting of innocent necks, no sleeping in coffins. Quite disappointing, really. I was expecting something more theatrical." He laughed. A real laugh this time, warm and surprised. "You're mocking me." "I'm mocking the situation," she corrected. "There's a difference, and I'm doing it because if I don't, I'll start thinking too hard about what we're actually doing, and then I'll panic, and that won't help anyone." "You're afraid," he said, and it wasn't a question. "Terrified," she admitted. "But not of you. Of failing her. Of making the wrong choice. Of—" She stopped, surprised by her own honesty. "Of being alone again," Everard finished softly. "Yes, I understand that." They sat in silence for a moment, the fire crackling between them. "Nell said something to me tonight," Lucasta said finally. "She said you've been alone for a very long time. She's perceptive. She also said I should make you less alone." Lucasta looked at him directly. "Is that what you want?" Everard's expression was unreadable. "What I want is irrelevant. I am what I am, Lucasta. That doesn't change." "I'm not asking you to change," she said. "I'm asking if you want company." "Yes," he said, so quietly she almost didn't hear it. "God help me, yes, help me." They reached the cottage in Somerset on a gray afternoon that threatened rain. It was smaller than Lucasta remembered, a 2-story stone structure with a thatched roof and windows that looked out over rolling hills, but it was clean and dry and, most importantly, isolated. Nell explored the cottage with the enthusiasm of a child who had never had a space to call her own, claiming the smallest bedroom as hers and immediately beginning to arrange her few possessions with meticulous care. Everard stood in the doorway, watching her with an expression Lucasta couldn't quite parse. "She'll be safe here," Lucasta said. "For now," he agreed. "But the order won't stop looking. Eventually, they'll find her." "Then we'll deal with that when it happens," Lucasta said. In the meantime, she deserves to be a child, to feel safe, to have a home. And you? Everard asked, turning to look at her. What do you deserve? The question caught her off guard. I don't. That's not. You've given up your work, your independence, your safety, he said. All for a child you'd never met and a man you barely know. What do you get in return? Lucasta considered the question seriously. Purpose, she said finally. For years, I've catalogued other people's lives, their books, their possessions, their legacies. I've never had one of my own. This, she gestured around the cottage, this feels like the beginning of something, something that matters. You matter, Everard said, and the intensity in his voice made her breath catch. You've always mattered, Lucasta. You just didn't know it. Before she could respond, Nell appeared in the doorway. There's a man at the gate, she said, her voice very small. A man in a gray coat. Everard moved faster than Lucasta had ever seen anyone move, crossing to the window in a blur of motion. When he turned back, his face was grim. The order. They've found us. How? Lucasta demanded. Does it matter? He was already moving toward the door. Take Nell upstairs. Lock the door. Don't come out until I tell you it's safe. What are you going to do? What I should have done 40 years ago, he said. Face them. Everard. Please, he said, and the word held a weight of desperation. Please, Lucasta, let me protect you, both of you. She wanted to argue, wanted to insist that she could help, but Nell's hand was in hers, trembling, and she knew that the child's safety had to come first. Don't do anything stupid, she said. I'll try, he said, and then he was gone. Lucasta led Nell upstairs, her heart pounding. From the window of the bedroom, she could see Everard approaching the gate, where 3 men in gray coats waited. She couldn't hear what they were saying, but she could see the tension in Everard's posture, the way the men shifted as though preparing for violence. He's going to fight them, Nell whispered. No, Lucasta said firmly. He's going to talk to them. That's what civilized people do. But even as she said it, she saw one of the men pull something from his coat. A document, perhaps, or a warrant. And Everard's expression hardened. Then, to her shock, Everard stepped back and opened the gate. What is he doing? Lucasta breathed. Inviting them in, Nell said. He's going to show them I'm not here. But you are here. Not where they'll look, Nell said. She pulled Lucasta toward the wardrobe in the corner. Grandmother taught me. When people come looking, you hide in plain sight. They climbed into the wardrobe just as footsteps sounded on the stairs. Lucasta held Nell close, barely breathing, as the bedroom door opened. As you can see, Everard's voice came, calm and measured. The cottage is empty, save for Miss Hartridge and myself. The child you're seeking is not here. We have testimony that a child matching the description was seen entering this property 2 days ago. A man's voice replied, cold, officious. Then your witness was mistaken, Everard said. Miss Hartridge is a cataloguer. She came here to complete work on my late brother's estate. There is no child. We'll need to search the premises. By all means, Everard said, and Lucasta heard the edge in his voice. But I should warn you that Miss Hartridge is a woman of considerable social standing. If you disturb her belongings without cause, she will have grounds for legal action. There was a pause. Then, we'll be quick. Lucasta heard them moving through the room, opening drawers, checking under the bed. Nell was perfectly still in her arms, not even breathing audibly. Finally, after what felt like hours, the footsteps retreated. Satisfied? Everard asked. For now, the man said, but we'll be watching, Mr. Blackstone. If the child surfaces, I'm sure you'll be the first to know, Everard said dryly. Now, if you'll excuse us, Miss Hartridge and I have work to complete. The men left, and Lucasta heard the front door close. Still, she waited, counting to 100 before she finally emerged from the wardrobe. Everard was standing in the doorway, his face pale. They're gone, he said. But they'll be back. They always come back. Then we need a more permanent solution, Lucasta said. We can't keep hiding her forever. No, Everard agreed. We can't. Over the next week, they worked together to craft a solution. Everard used his connections to arrange for Nell to be legally adopted by a distant cousin, a woman who lived in Scotland and who, for a generous sum, was willing to claim the child as her own. The paperwork was complex, requiring signatures and seals and the cooperation of multiple solicitors, but Everard navigated it with the ease of someone who had spent centuries learning to manipulate human systems. Lucasta, meanwhile, prepared Nell for the transition. The child was reluctant to leave, clinging to Lucasta with a desperation that broke her heart. I don't want to go, Nell whispered. I want to stay with you, and with him. I know, darling, Lucasta said, but this is the only way to keep you safe. The cousin, her name is Flora, she's kind, and she has a big house with a garden, and she'll take care of you. But she's not you, Nell said. No, Lucasta agreed. She's not. But I'll visit, I promise. And so will Everard. Promise? Promise. The day Nell left was gray and cold, the kind of day that felt like an ending. Everard drove the carriage himself, and Lucasta sat beside him, holding Nell's hand all the way to the coaching inn where Flora waited. The goodbye was quick. Too quick, Lucasta thought. But perhaps that was better. Nell hugged her fiercely, then turned to Everard. Thank you, she said solemnly, for keeping your promise to grandmother. Thank you, Everard replied, just as solemnly, for reminding me what it means to be human. And then she was gone, climbing into Flora's carriage and disappearing down the road. Lucasta and Everard stood in silence for a long time, watching until the carriage was out of sight. She'll be all right, Everard said finally. I know, Lucasta said, but I'll miss her. So will I. They returned to the cottage as the sun was setting, painting the hills in shades of gold and amber. Lucasta made tea, a habit she'd developed over the past week, and they sat by the fire, not speaking, just existing in each other's presence. What will you do now? Everard asked finally. I don't know, Lucasta admitted. Return to London, I suppose. Resume my work. And if I asked you to stay? She looked at him, startled. Stay? Here, he said, with me, not... He stopped, searching for words. Not as anything more than what we are now. Just company, partnership, someone to share the silence with. Everard, I know what I'm asking is selfish, he said. I know I have no right to ask it. But these past weeks, having you here, it's been... He stopped again, frustrated. I've been alone for so long, Lucasta. I'd forgotten what it was like to have someone to talk to, someone who sees me, really sees me, and doesn't run. I'm not running, Lucasta said softly. I never was. Then stay, he said. Please. She should have said no. She should have listed all the reasons why it was impossible, her work, her reputation, the sheer impracticality of sharing a cottage with a vampire. But when she opened her mouth, what came out was, yes. His expression transformed, relief and joy and something deeper, something that made her chest ache. Yes? He repeated, as though he couldn't quite believe it. Yes, she said, on one condition. Anything. You have to tell me your story, she said, all of it. How you became what you are, why you left Thornmere, what Mercy Ashton did to earn your protection. I want to know everything. He smiled, a real smile, warm and unguarded. That could take a very long time. Good, Lucasta said. I'm not going anywhere. And so he told her. Over the following weeks and months, as autumn turned to winter and winter to spring, Everard shared the story of his transformation, a tale of love and betrayal and a curse that had seemed like damnation, but had, over the centuries, become simply a fact of his existence. He told her about Mercy Ashton, the young woman he'd saved from an arranged marriage by offering her employment as his housekeeper, and how she'd kept his secret until her dying day. He told her about the loneliness of immortality, the weight of watching everyone he'd ever cared about age and die while he remained unchanged. And Lucasta listened, asking questions, offering observations, slowly piecing together the puzzle of the man who had become her closest friend. In return, she told him about her own life, the parents who'd died when she was young, the aunt who'd raised her with books instead of affection, the career she'd built from necessity and grown to love. She told him about the loneliness of being a woman in a profession dominated by men, the constant need to prove herself, the exhaustion of always being underestimated. "We're quite the pair," she said one evening, as they sat by the fire. "The immortal and the cataloguer." "The monster and the scholar," Everard corrected gently. "You're not a monster," Lucasta said. "You're just different, and there's nothing wrong with different." He looked at her with an expression she couldn't quite parse. "How do you do that?" "Do what?" "Make it sound so simple. As though being what I am is just another fact to be catalogued and filed away." "Isn't it?" she asked. "You don't hurt people. You don't kill. You've spent centuries trying to do good, to make up for whatever you think you've done wrong. That's not a monster, Everard. That's just a man trying to be better than he was." "And if I can't be better?" he asked quietly. "If this is all I'll ever be?" "Then you'll still be enough," Lucasta said. "For me, at least." The words landed like stones between them, heavy with meaning. Everard reached out slowly, giving her time to pull away, and took her hand. "Lucasta," he said, and his voice was rough with emotion. "I need you to understand something. I will never age. I will never change. And you will grow old. You will have a life that I can only watch from the sidelines. I can't, I won't, ask you to give that up for me." "You're not asking," she said. "I'm choosing. There's a difference." "But, Everard," she interrupted gently, "I've spent my entire life cataloging other people's stories. I think it's time I started living my own. And if that story includes you, immortal, unchanging, occasionally brooding, then so be it. I'll take what time we have and be grateful for it." He stared at her, and she saw the moment he stopped fighting, the moment he allowed himself to hope. "I don't deserve you," he said. "Probably not," she agreed. "But you're stuck with me anyway." He laughed then, a sound of pure relief, and pulled her closer. For a long moment they simply held each other, two people who had found in each other something they'd both thought lost, the possibility of home. "There's something else," Everard said eventually, "something I haven't told you." "Oh?" "The curse, the thing that made me what I am. It's not permanent. There's a way to break it. But it requires—" He stopped, searching for words. "It requires a sacrifice. Someone who loves me would have to give up something precious. And I could never ask." "What kind of sacrifice?" Lucasta asked. "A life," he said quietly. "Not a death, nothing so dramatic, but a choice to give up immortality, to become mortal. It's a two-way exchange. The curse transfers, in a sense. The vampire becomes human, and the human becomes immortal," Lucasta finished. "I see." "I would never ask you to do that," Everard said quickly. "I'm only telling you because I want you to know that I've thought about it, about being human again, about having a normal life, a normal death, but I could never ask someone to take my place." Lucasta was quiet for a long moment, thinking. "What if," she said slowly, "there was another way? What if the sacrifice wasn't about transferring the curse, but about breaking it entirely? I don't understand." "You said someone who loves you would have to give up something precious," Lucasta said. "What if what they gave up wasn't their mortality, but their future, their chance at a different life?" Lucasta, I'm not finished, she said. What if I chose to stay with you knowing full well that I'll age and you won't? What if that choice, that conscious decision to love you anyway, despite the inevitable ending, what if that's the sacrifice? Everard shook his head. That's not how curses work. They require something tangible, something that can be measured and weighed. Then we'll find another way, Lucasta said firmly. Because I'm not giving up on you, Everard Blackstone, and I'm certainly not letting you give up on yourself. Over the following months, they searched. Lucasta combed through every book in Thornmere's library, looking for references to curses and their breaking. Everard reached out to old contacts, vampires and scholars who might know something useful. And slowly, painstakingly, they began to piece together a possibility. The curse, they learned, was tied to Everard's guilt, the belief that he deserved to be punished for whatever sin had led to his transformation. Breaking it required not a sacrifice, but an acceptance, the conscious choice to forgive himself and allow himself to be loved. It sounded simple. It was anything but. I don't know if I can, Everard admitted one night, his voice raw. I've carried this for so long, Lucasta. The guilt, the shame, the certainty that I'm damned. I don't know how to let it go. Then let me help you, Lucasta said. Let me show you what I see when I look at you. Not a monster, not a curse, just a man who's been alone too long and who deserves to be happy. It took time. Weeks turned to months, and months to a year. But slowly, gradually, Everard began to change. Not physically, but emotionally. He laughed more easily. He spoke about the future without flinching. He allowed himself to hope. And then, on a spring morning exactly 1 year after Nell had left, Everard woke to find that his reflection had returned. He stood in front of the mirror in the cottage, staring at his own face, as though seeing it for the first time. Lucasta stood beside him, her hand in his, tears streaming down her cheeks. It worked, she whispered. Everard, it worked. He turned to her, and she saw that he was crying too. I can feel it, he said. My heart. It's beating. Lucasta, I'm human, she finished. You're human. He pulled her into his arms, holding her so tightly she could barely breathe. Thank you, he said against her hair. Thank you for not giving up on me. Never, she said. I will never give up on you. They were married that summer in the small church in the village, with Nell, who had traveled down from Scotland with Flora, as their witness. It was a quiet ceremony, attended by only a handful of people, but it was perfect. As they stood at the altar, exchanging vows, Lucasta looked at the man beside her, no longer immortal, no longer cursed, just Everard, and felt a surge of profound gratitude. They had found each other in the most unlikely of circumstances, and they had chosen each other despite every reason not to. I love you, she said, and the words felt like a promise and a benediction all at once. I love you, he replied. For however long we have. For however long we have, she agreed. And as they walked out of the church into the sunlight, real sunlight, warm on Everard's face for the first time in centuries, Lucasta knew that whatever time they had would be enough, because they had each other, and they had chosen this life together, and that was more than either of them had ever dared to hope for.